Okay, everyone, good afternoon, and welcome to the Rails Online Roundtable, Approaches to Genrefication. My name is Dan Bostrom. I'm the Rails Member Engagement Manager, and in a few minutes, I'm going to be turning it over to our panelists. We've assembled a great team of panelists today, and they're going to tell you a little bit about how they're doing things in their libraries. But before we do that, I just want to go over a few notes and updates. So we're so pleased that you can join us today. Again, we think this is going to be really fun, regardless of whether you are a school librarian, a children's librarian in a big public library, or a children's librarian or other librarian in a small library. I think you're going to find something of use here today. And a big thank you, especially to Jennifer G, who kind of came up with the idea for this event and who pushed me into doing it. And I love the idea right off the bat. So I think we're going to have a lot of fun. Okay, so here's a little bit about how we're going to operate today. I'm going to do just a quick kind of run through of some news and updates. Then we'll have our three short presentations. Jennifer Peterson from Indian Trails Public Library is going to handle our big public library side of things. Jennifer Garden from Milledgeville Public Library is going to do kind of the small library perspective. And then also Lani Maldonado from Lincolnwood School District 74 is also going to talk about the school library approach. So we have two types of libraries represented, but I think this covers a lot of you out there who are participating today. So I'm excited about that. That will probably take us right to about 12:45 or so. Then we'll do questions, and I just want to encourage you, if you do have questions, please use the Q&A box on your toolbar. You should see it on your toolbar. I will handle those. We'll ask them probably at the end, just to kind of make sure that everything goes smoothly. If you can use names, that would be helpful. I'll put that into the chat box. But then we'll do a quick wrap up, and we'll have everybody out of here by 3 o'clock. Okay, so let's just look at a couple things that we have to offer for you. The first is the My Library is grants for schools. For all you school librarians out there, this is new. This is associated with My Library. My Library is campaign, which is all about providing examples of the value that you provide for your community. So we're offering 10 grants of up to $1,000 each, and the purpose of this is kind of get you thinking about ways to promote and market your librarian services. Maybe it's design or printing, maybe it's materials, maybe it's just a coordinated campaign that you have to sort of help promote yourself. Whatever it is you want to do, we want to help you out. And we're also giving you the chance to apply using video. So if you want to put together a video application, you can do that. Please note that the deadline is January 15th, 2021. That's coming up. Scary that 2021 is coming up, but actually maybe it's a good thing. So please note that. Rails has a podcast, and it's called Sparks. And our most recent episode was about library data. Our executive director, Deirdre Brennan, talks to Lauren Rosenthal, who is the director at the Fox River Valley Public Library District. And it's a really fun conversation. If you're at all interested in data and libraries, I would suggest checking it out. You can subscribe to Sparks via Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also watch this as a video on the Rails YouTube page. So if you look on the Rails YouTube page, it's uploaded there. Last thing, and then we'll get this thing turned over. Okay, so we have another one of these events coming up on December 9th. This is my colleague Eric Bain from Rails. He's the e-content specialist, or sorry, the special projects coordinator at Rails, and he's going to do a really short presentation on ILL and schools, interlibrary loan for schools. This event is open for anyone, so if you're in a public library and you're interested, feel free to sign up. It's going to be a lot about Find More Illinois, which is our ILL facilitation tool. Eric is a wizard who's been working with ILL for a long time, and he's a great, I think he's going to put together a pretty great presentation, and I'm really looking forward to this. There will be a lot of time for discussion and questions and things like that, so feel free to get signed up. That's on L2 if you want to sign up. Okay, I'm going to stop talking, but before I do that, I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer Peterson, who's the Youth Services Librarian at the Indian Trails Public Library District, and I'm going to stop sharing, Jennifer, and you can go ahead and share your screen.
All right, there we go.
Awesome.
Thanks, Dan. All right, yes, my name is Jennifer Peterson. I am a Youth Services Librarian at Indian Trails Library. This is actually the second library that I have done big picture book genrefication projects. But this one was definitely the biggest. And ours was a pretty large collection and it works for us. So hopefully I'm not telling you things that you already know. Hopefully I can answer some questions for you. So I'll just start, when you're looking at your picture books and you're starting your project, it's overwhelming. I know with us, and I'll get to numbers later. But we had, I believe, over 10,000 books, just picture books. And it was a very well circulating section in our department, in our library. So a lot of, people were kind of wondering, why do this? Why it's already working. And but we had the opportunity to do this when we were under renovation. And so our library actually closed and we moved to a temporary location. So we did a lot of this without the public being impacted. And I'd say that was a really important aspect of how we approached it. We had a team, and that's kind of my first bullet, is definitely form a team if you can. I know some of you might be in, just yourself at a school library or at a smaller library. But if you do have more than one person that can help you with it, it's really helpful, especially when you've got questionable items and you don't quite know which category to put a book in. It's always helpful to have that other person. If you are in a team, make sure you have one person that can be that final judge, because not everyone is going to agree on where a book should be placed. And you might not even know where, you might just be completely confused about where to put it. We would often also ask people from other departments that weren't in kids to look at a book and say, what category do you think this book should be in? And so that was really helpful as well. Obviously research what other libraries have done with regards to their categories and their shelving and their labeling, their signs, and their processes. Get a feel for how their workflow is going. And you'll get an idea that way. You'll find out what works. But importantly, you want this to reflect your collection, not another library's collection. And the one thing that we did that I feel like was pretty unique is, and you'll see at the bottom of my pages here, is we've got these icons at the bottom, and those represent our categories and what we call our subcategories. And so that was something that we did that worked for us. And most importantly, this project will take time. This took us over just about a year to do from start to finish. And we had 3 people at a minimum working on this. So it will take time. It's not going to happen in a matter of a few weeks. You have to think long-term and about the impact that this is going to make on your kids or your members who are using your collection. And so during your project, you've got your team, you've got your plan, you've got kind of everything in place. You are going to need to look at every single book. We looked at every book, which is why we needed a team of helpers, because we had 10,000 books. And the one important part too was that we determined, qualifications for keeping a book, weeding a book, and replacing a book. And we acted right away on those qualifications. And that will keep your process flowing. So our kind of important categories or qualifications were, I love this book, my members love this book, we're going to genrefy it. And we had task slips in which we would write the categories on there, put it in the book, and then we would move that along in the process, because we also had to recatalog, we had to relabel. And so then that book was genrefied and moved along. Your second is, this book is damaged, it's outdated, it's culturally irresponsible, it hasn't circulated in 5 years, or it's just not that great, we don't want to keep it. Big thumbs down, weed it, discard it right away. Don't keep it in a pile for, future. You don't need it, you don't want it. And you've got one other section, you have a well-loved book, it's sticky, you want it in your collection, but you need to replace it. And we would often keep those on the side so that, perhaps once a week or, once every 2 weeks, whatever your process is, to replace books, that's when then we would say, okay, we're going to replace those books. And sometimes we would find that books were out of print, we couldn't get them anymore. And so then we would just weed them. And that sometimes makes the decision for you. An optional fourth category is we have no idea where it should go. Or I'm going to let my coworker decide because I can't decide. And so then that's where we would put those aside and say, I'm going to have my coworker look at this because I'm too attached to it. I can't figure it out, or I don't even know what this book is about because it's so out there. And so these are kind of the different categories that we used when we were making decisions. We had really great results. And again, I said, this is the second library I've done this. And I think the most important part I found is that it empowers kids to find their own books and books that they enjoy. Time and time again, we see them, they go right away up to find their favorite book. They know where their favorite book is and they're face out, so they can just kind of browse and look for something. And it is more accessible for kids and adults because you can just easily flip and you're not having to, worry about something falling out. It is easier to find books based on your interests. It's especially important for discoverability, for finding new books to read. Our just for instance, we've got, a topic, animals is one of our categories. We've got a subgroup in there about forest animals. Well, all types of forest animals are in there. So you might have a child who's really interested in bears, but then, they discover squirrels. And so then they go in there and, they find a new favorite book. And I have found that it is much more fun to search for books. And it also helps me as the collection librarian. This is my collection. I do manage this collection, and it does help me see where my gaps are in my content so that I can weed them or I can purchase. And then I also know what is getting checked out the most. Our biggest categories right now are probably our favorite characters, which are, like, I've got an example down there, Peppa Pig. Those are obviously the more popular ones, but then I can also see how those are ebbing and flowing, because as you can see, our shelves here can get either very full or very empty. And these are just some pictures of our shelving. Little fan here out of the way. There we go. So this one over here, when this is the beginning of it and it goes long versus the depth here. But we've got all brand new picture books are in the very first bins. And then we go alphabetically with our categories. And you can see our signs here. We've got activities, A being the first, and then it wraps around and it goes like that. And then it goes along the back wall here. And this is just another category. We had a standalone, and that ended up being things that go. And this one here, you're going to have, and this is again, when you're brainstorming for your categories, favorite characters, and this here is also what this is. And so you'll see favorite characters are along here, and then favorite authors. And favorite authors is really great because we've got Jan Brett, Margaret Wise Brown, Tommy DePaulo, Dr. Seuss, places where you don't really want to keep them separate and you don't really know where they should go. You can just say, oh, I'm going to make him a favorite author, and then all of his books are together. These are some of our labels, and we really labored over how to create these labels. And I'm really confident that this is a really good choice in how we did this, because we have these icons here, and then we also have the corresponding colors. So you'll see we start with pick, and pick is our like general, picture books in, youth department. And then you see our main category here, stories, activities. And then underneath that, we have our subcategories. We have here wordless, which is within stories. Over here, we have music, imagination, sports. And so that helps us, instead of just saying, oh, these are all activities, go for it, look through 200 books. Well, that kind of defeats the purpose of genrefying. We decided to kind of group these a little bit more so that people can, again, discover new books that they like within their interests. What we did here is the author's last name, so that the shelvers and obviously for cataloging, and so you can find things, are alphabetically by the author. So for instance, this would be activities, music, this would be in the G's. And so everything A through G, and then, G through Z would all be music, would all be alphabetized. And then the spine label here, because when our shelvers are shelving, they oftentimes are only looking at this spine part. They can then see the colors, and they can match up the colors in that way too. And that makes it, again, you can visually identify, oh, orange means stories, purple means activities. So just some questions about, these are common things that we get asked. We became at 12,000 books. I think I said 10. We had more than I thought. We had, 12,722 books. And after we genrefied, we were at 9,600. We did weed over 3,000 books. And again, we were in a temporary building, so we were boxing books up, storing them. It was a big process. So if you don't have to do that, it'll go much easier for you. What else? It did take 1 year to genrefy, and this included the weeding, the replacing. So anytime we ordered replacements and then had to put them through the process, and then labeling. We did label all the books, and that was just because it was such a big project. Our tech services they had the regular collections to deal with, and so we decided, well, we can do that. One thing that worked really well for us is we had to communicate with our members. This was a very loved collection in our library. We're a very busy library. And we communicated with them about what we were doing. And then when we opened up in our new building, we were able to give them a preview of this new and improved collection. And it really tied in nicely, because we did have this big, brand new, beautiful building. And so this just flowed very nicely into, that being new and improved. And we also did create a brochure, and I'll include a link to that, so that you can see how we did the brochure, and we still use them, and anybody can take one, and you'll be able to see how the categories work and how you can choose your book, and it's really very nice. One thing to keep in mind, you will need to keep up with the collection maintenance. Sections do ebb and flow, both physically, meaning, if you saw the picture, the bottom bin will sometimes get very stuffed, and then you'll have an empty bin right next to it. So you do have to shift the books as things get checked out. You also categorically may need to update. Peppa Pig was a new category that I added about a year ago, because they were starting to come out with a lot of Peppa Pig books. We had a character called Kipper, and we only had a handful of books, and he was getting shoved in the back, and I don't think anybody really knew we had them. So I took out those and I put him, I think, in pets. But you have to be able to recognize when those trends are going to happen. You might need to create new signs if you're shifting. What else? You might need whole new categories. So like under places, which is this dark green here, I was finding we had lots of books that were they were about being at the library, but not necessarily about reading. And so I created a whole new category for them. And that again is, we created the little icon, you're creating the call number, then you're labeling those books. And then I weeded again and evaluated categories again just this past year. So it was there for about 3 years before we started reevaluating everything again. And I'm always in there looking at things, so I would say definitely keep up with that. Let's see, what else can I tell you? We have a more category, which I think is really helpful. At the very end, sorry. At the very end of each category, there's kind of like a catch-all, and those are kind of the books it's an activity, but you don't know where to put it. You can just put it in the more, and that covers it. What we were finding is that our more category was getting really big. And so that was part of this weeding project that I did over the past year, was to evaluate that more, and can those books fit better in other places? And so then, you're just, again, you're ebbing and flowing and keeping up with your collection as it grows and develops. Are we taking questions now, Dan, or are we taking questions at the end?
I think we'll do questions at the end.
Okay.
So thank you so much, Jennifer.
Yeah,
I really appreciate it.
Oh, one more thing, I think, because everyone always wants to know, did your circulation increase? Yes, our circulation increased about an average of about 12% from the time over the course of a year. So yeah,
wow,
it did.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so that's great. I appreciate that, Jennifer. If you have questions for Jennifer, again, we'll do this in the Q&A part. Make sure to indicate who the presenter is that you want to ask the question to. So Jennifer P, Jennifer G, who's going to be up next, and then Lani at the end. Okay, so great. Thank you, Jennifer. If you would not mind, there you go. Okay, and so our next presenter is Jennifer Garden, who's at the Milledgeville Public Library, and as she likes to say, she is the librarian because she is a one-person show at her library. So Jennifer, take it away. Do you want to start sharing your slides? There you go.
I have to unmute too. That would help.
Yeah.
Okay. So my library genrefied a couple years ago. It was a big, long process because, like Dan said, I'm it. So it took a long time. It was just me working on it, and it was not an easy process. But I mostly started it because I had kids that were only reading one section of the library, or like in the picture book section, I had kids reading the golden books, little golden books, over and over and over again. I had a girl whose mom brought her in and said, she is not allowed to check out American Girl books anymore, because she would start at the beginning and read her way through the whole series and then go back to the beginning and read her way through. So I decided we were going to change things up. As you could see from this slide, one of the things we did change up was we got rid of Dewey. We do not use the Dewey system in my library anymore. When you do this, it is constantly changing. I have a list of all of the headings and the groups and all of that, and it's always changing. I just recently added a birthdays and parties collection to my picture book section. It's always changing. So my recommendation, if you're going to do this, is start with your list of priorities. Decide what categories are your biggest ones. This slide, I actually picked these on purpose. The picture on the left, you can see that's our kids' holiday section. And this was early on in the process. And if you see those, you can see there's Christmas, there's Easter, there's Hanukkah, there's Jewish, there's when I got done labeling everything, I realized that I had way too many subcategories. So instead of having, Hanukkah and Jewish ones and Hindi ones and, Islamic holidays and all that, I just made one category that's holidays, religious, holidays, general. And then I do have a separate section for Christmas and Easter and Thanksgiving, because those are the kind of the bigger holidays that people look at in my community. So, it was constantly changing. The picture on the right with the medical labels on them, I had two sections. I had a health section and I had a medical section. This medical section was in the adult nonfiction section. And I got books in and I was, does this go in health or does it go in medical? And I couldn't really decide. And finally I said, this is ridiculous. Why am I driving myself crazy? And I just combined everything into the health section so that now it's all there and it's all in the same place and it's not confusing me. One of the biggest recommendations I give people when they're going to do this is don't try to make permanent labels now. Do label your shelves or your bins or whatever you're putting things in, but don't make them permanent. This on the very far right of the screen, you can see all of the early labels. Those labels, they're just printed out on pieces of paper and I cut them up and I put sticky tack on the back of them and I stuck them on the shelves. Those labels were in my library for 2 years. And when I finally was sure that that was what it was going to be in the end, I went ahead and bought the labels you can see on the bottom of the screen. And now those are on the shelves and it looks much nicer and it's not driving my OCD tendencies crazy. But it was something that I waited to do because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't getting something or too much of something or not enough of something. My second recommendation, do not be afraid to ask for help. Jennifer P. mentioned this, asking other people. In my case, I don't have other people to ask. So what I did is when I genrefied, and for me, the biggest problem was in the kids nonfiction section. My nieces were 8 and 12. So I would call my sister and go, I need to talk to the girls. And she'd put them on the phone and I'd say, okay, girls, I've got this book on wind power, like windmills and wind farms and stuff. Would you look for that under technology and energy or technology and power? The biggest thing I found that helped was to make it very specific. I already knew it needed to be in technology. I just needed to know if it should be under energy or power. They both said energy, so now all of my alternative energy source books are under technology and energy. One of the things I ran into was the whole Bigfoot issue and Bermuda Triangle, and where did those go? When I did this with our nonfiction and some with the picture books, I've been using the BISAC system as my general guide. It's not the end all be all, but it's my general guide. So I flipped through the BISAC system and I said, well, where would Bigfoot go? And the category they had for that was called Curiosities and Wonders. Now, I don't know about any of you, but my 8 and 12-year-old nieces did not use the word curiosity to mean Bigfoot. That was a little bit too much of a big word for them. So I said to them, hey, girls, I don't think this is the right category. So what if I said to you, this is the section for curiosities and wonders, what do you think would be in that section? And what they said was, oh, how do things work? Or why is the sky blue? And I said, okay, yeah, this is definitely not the right section for Bigfoot. So then I said to him, okay, so where would you look for a book about like Bigfoot or witches and wizards or the Bermuda Triangle? And they thought about it for a little while and then they were like, weird stuff? I said, okay, don't really want to call the category weird stuff. So I said, well, how about strange things? They were like, yeah, that's good. And so was born a new category that is not in the BISAC system: strange creatures, strange magic, strange places, and then strange things. In every single one of my categories, I do have a general subcategory. And in this one, it's strange things is what the general subcategory is in that one. I also genrefied our picture books. This was a long process. These are just tubs from Walmart. I started with Christmas books because I figured while parents might be okay reading Pete the Cat Saves Christmas in July, it's probably going to get the most usage in the collection when Christmas rolls around. So I pulled out all of the Christmas books and I relabeled them, and I changed their location in the catalog, and I put them in the bins, and then I shuffled all the other books down. And then I found my next category, and I pulled out all of those books and relabeled them and put them in bins and shuffled. It took, I think, 2 weeks to do the picture books. This was always a work in progress. Patrons were really good about the fact that the books were all kind of jumbled around a little bit, not exactly where they were used to them being, but they were okay with it. As you can see, I just took a clear plastic pocket, like a card pocket or book pocket from Demco, slapped it on the front of the box, took these are probably scrap cards from our old card catalog that I eliminated when I got here because it was really out of date. And I just put a picture and a label for that bin, and that category on the bin. And then the same thing is on the spine label. My hope was that by putting a picture on there, the kids would more or less get the books back in the right bins. Of course, we all know exactly how well that works. But in the 2 years that I've had this system, I think I've probably only found about a dozen books that were misshelved and in the wrong bins. So it's worked okay. I do have several categories that, I had a lot of books on planes and trains and cars and trucks, or as you can see in the bottom, the TV friends, I called them, Fancy Nancy, Winnie the Pooh, Olivia, Sesame Street, SpongeBob, Corduroy, characters that kids see on TV shows. Peppa Pig is in there now. And some of those there just wasn't enough books in just that one category to have its own bin. And I don't have enough space, to be quite frank, to do that. So I combined them. And in this case, I called the bin the TV Friends. Now, you can kind of see in the spine labels in the two books that are in between those bins that the spine labels don't say TV Friends. The spine labels say Winnie the Pooh, Olivia, Sesame Street, SpongeBob, just in case in the future I do end up with enough books in that category that I create a new bin for that person or that character or that whatever it is. I can then just take those books out, move them over, and change the card on the front of the bin. It makes it a lot easier. I do still have several books that are, I have a couple of bins that are A, B, C, D, E, because there really isn't another category that those books fit in. And I'm constantly going through those bins all the time, trying to find a new category so that I don't have a lot of books filed by the author's first letter of the author's last name. But I keep trying, but I don't want to shoehorn a book into a category that it really doesn't fit in logically for the patrons. For the kids nonfiction, the fact books, as the kids call them, you can kind of see some of the labels here. There is one category in the BISAC. One of the reasons I did nonfiction was because I was tired of looking for train books in 3 different places, because they could be in 3 different places in the Dewey system. So there was one category that I wasn't entirely happy with under the BISAC system, and that is the category of space, because there's 2 places you can find it. You can find it under science and astronomy, or you can find it under technology and space on the kids' side and astronautics on the adult side. I have found that it's actually been pretty intuitive for the patrons. I just say to them, well, it depends. Are you looking for a book about stars and physical space, like planets, stars, comets, the night sky? That kind of thing is under science. Whereas space travel, space exploration, astronauts, that kind of thing is under technology. They're, oh, okay, that makes sense. So they've managed to figure that, that seems to be pretty intuitive. The history, I have general categories like ancient history, European history, military history, and then there's US history. And for the most part, it's here's the stuff that happened in the 19th century, the 20th century, the 21st century, that sort of thing. But I do pull out the various wars, basically the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, and the War of 1812 in the US history, because those were ones that happened primarily on US soil, or very much only really impacted the US and obviously Britain for the revolution in 1812. But it was very impactful to us, but not necessarily to the rest of the world. Oh, goodness, that was not supposed to happen. Hold on. I've got a box in the way. There we go. Okay, so the adult nonfiction. I did the same thing over there that I did with the kids, starting with, one category, pulling everything out, moving it, shifting all the old stuff down. And this is, you can see in the top picture, some of the military stuff, the Iraq War, Korea, World War I, World War II, Vietnam, that all goes under military history. Sometimes on the spine labels, often on the spine labels, the words just don't fit. The name of the category doesn't really fit. Like you can see in the top picture, history, military, special. That's special forces, but special forces doesn't fit on the label. You can also see in that top picture on that special forces book, there's kind of a weird looking shadow around it. That's because when I originally labeled everything, I just printed out the new categories for them on a piece of paper, cut it apart and taped it to the spine. Because if I decided to change something, I didn't want to use a spine label and quote unquote waste a spine label doing it. So I just did a piece of paper and tape. And when those get kind of dog-eared, then I replace it with an actual spine label. But for the most part, I've just used paper and tape on a lot of these things when I relabeled them. You can also see the lack of space in the bottom picture. The category is called Body, Mind, and Spirit. And on the spine label, it just says body. In the catalog, in the card catalog, on the online catalog, it says Body, Mind, and Spirit. But on the spine label, there's just not enough space. You can also see to the left of that bottom picture, one of the subcategories on biography, the women, biographies of women. There's a lot of subcategories. Most of the things only have the main category and a sub. And then with like biographies or the military history, I go down a little bit further just so that things are gathered together. And one of the biggest categories in my biography section is memoirs. And that's biography, memoir, and then the last name of the subject of the book. The last category, the last section that we genrefied at my library was the kids fiction section, or the chapter books. Again, this one was done because I had a kid reading American Girl books over and over and over again. I had a bunch of kids who just read Percy Jackson and all of the associated Rick Riordan books over and over and over again. And I thought, these kids need to know that there's something else in that category, and it'll make it easier for them to find something. If I really like American Girl, they might like Girlhood Journeys. They might like Dear America. They might like the Royal Diaries, or the Girls of Many Lands series, or Laura Ingalls Wilder, or something else like that. And it was harder for them to find it the way we originally had things shelved. So I went ahead and separated everything out, and I label everything with paper tape. It's just a simple paper tape. I buy it from Demco or the library store, TLS, or wherever, whoever's got the color I need. You can see in the top picture of the shelf is the kids section. All those green tape books, those are mysteries. And then on the bottom shelf below that, all the purple tape books star animals, like the one and only Ivan, and Charlotte's Web is in there. Marguerite Henry's books are in there, that sort of thing. The adult section, I did not separate out in genre like that, mostly because I don't have the space. But I did bring some of those colored tapes over and and use those on that side. So you can see that bottom picture of a shelf, that's the adult side. You can see a couple books there with the orange tape, that's sci-fi fantasy. Several books with the green tape for mysteries. There aren't any Westerns on that shelf, those have gray tape. And then the red tape, there are large prints. And it seems to make it a lot easier for the patrons to find something they're looking for. If they're looking for a large print, they just look for that stripe of red tape right above the spine label, and it seems to be fairly easy for them to find. So that's what we did. And if anybody wants the list of categories that I used, I can drop that in the chat box as soon as I'm done here.
Awesome. Thank you, Jennifer. I really appreciate it. Okay, so we're running a little bit long here, and one thing I did is I actually made the Q&A section that anybody can comment. So if you have comments, if you have questions, please ask them, and somebody will jump in, and even someone from the attendees can answer them, because I don't think we're gonna have a whole lot of time for general Q&A. So Lani, I'm gonna turn this over to you. Lani's the library media specialist at the Lincolnwood School District 74. I'm sorry, Lani, I forget what school you're actually at. Oh, Lincoln Hall. There you go.
Yep, Lincoln Hall. So, all right. Hi, everybody. I'm not gonna take too much time because I know you might have more questions, and I'd rather you ask those because a lot of my things are very consistent with the other two librarians. I came into a middle school library that had just been renovated, and like everyone has said, this process has definitely taken a long time. I would say I'm in like the middle of the process. I started my first year, I felt like I needed a full year to kind of see how the kids use the library, how the teachers use the library, and what might be the best way to kind of approach this. Prior to being in a middle school library, I was in an elementary school library. So I kind of had this idea that genrefying was probably going to be the best way to go, but I really wanted to make sure that it was working for the kids because, that's who is using the library the most. So I took a lot of time to research, have conversations with the teachers, get to know the kids. Sometimes I feel like with school libraries is that you sometimes have to like explain your why. And when you go to do a process like this in a school library, people are like, well, what do you mean you're going to, change how a library works? So you might have to just, do a little bit of research, talk to people, show them some different things. And I felt like this was the best approach to start. Our kids would constantly come in and say, well, I want to read a, nonfiction this, and I want it to be about this particular topic. And instead of me always finding it, I really wanted to find a way that the kids could ideally be in charge of themselves in here. So when we did that, I started with looking at our fiction. This year, I am going to delve into the nonfiction and really get after it. But for our fiction, I started with how some of my reading teachers were doing their projects. So about once a month, I had many of the reading teachers doing similar genre types of projects, and just felt like a natural way to kind of start the process here at the school. Again, we played with ideas of like, what do we name the genres and how do we do this? And after doing a lot of research, I really came back to the main component of the fact that this is about the students. So we created kind of like a very basic list of what the adults thought might be good genres or what worked best with the projects that were already happening. And then we sent that out to the kids and really got their feedback, because if they're going to be the ones that are finding the books, we want to make it so that they feel like they're part of the process. So after that, we start working with different labels, different changes in the catalog. And again, very similar to both of the people before me, it really is just this process that you kind of just have to keep after, keep your organization set up, ready to go. And, you know, and like, again, for me, it was more small chunks at, you know, like once a month. So I felt like it was pretty manageable to get through. And like I said, I'm in the middle of the process. So I took last year to get all of the genres set up. And again, when I first came in, this was a renovated library. So there was different types of shelving, which kind of naturally led to where the books would go. You can kind of see a little bit behind me. We still do have like a typical fiction section, but the reason for that is that as we kind of rotate through the year, each genre has its chance to go through and be highlighted. But additionally, it helps me just kind of keep up with weeding, making sure that the books are being checked out, making sure that, you know, maybe I need to modernize a certain genre or section. And that's just one way that I organizationally kind of keep up with it. We've seen a ton of benefits. I, you know, cannot say enough of all the benefits that we've seen, even to the point where my teachers, as they're doing different curriculum projects, have also started to want their own genrefied sections, which is really cool. So again, it's, you know, kind of this non-traditional organization, but I felt like it just lent its hand a lot better to how the kids were looking for books, you know, a way to make them a little bit more self-sufficient while they are in here. And then it really helped with just making sure I have a smaller collection, but it's a collection that rotates a lot. So it's a way for me to really keep on top of kind of the latest and greatest books that are out there. So nothing gets like too old and really makes the kids want to read, which is ideally the, you know, the biggest part of a school library. Other than that, you can see, like I said, our teachers really started to get into it. I have a couple of different teachers that do similar projects each year. And as our collection for their projects grow, we found that it just made more sense to give them their own little section on a shelf, as well as, you know, making them in our catalog, you know, easy to find and also easy to find on the shelf. So that was kind of a neat little benefit of working with the teachers and the kids on this. And then just here's a couple of pictures. So you can kind of see in the front, you will see our science fiction section. And again, the shelves just naturally kind of lend themselves to being able to highlight books. And then my biggest part that I have really worked on throughout the year is really getting that signage up. So the more you go through this and you know, again, like everyone has said, the more signage that you can put up for, you know, for the patrons, for anybody coming in here, the better it is. They can, you know, find things themselves. It makes it just a little bit more fun, appealing to the eyes. And also just helps you, you know, kind of, you know, just organize as well. So I'm going to turn it over back to Dan, and then we can get some questions in.
Yeah, actually, Lani, I've got a question for you right off the bat. You ready?
Yes.
Okay, so the question is, what was your experience genrifying nonfiction, and also could you share your category list?
Oh, sure. I can share my I'll probably have to. I might have to send it to you because I have to find it in my Google Drive. But I would say, as far as nonfiction, for me, it's a little bit of a slower process. So we're finding that the we have a really nice collection of nonfiction, but a lot of it is a little bit older than I would like right now. So I'm finding that I'm actually getting rid of a lot more than I had intended. And so I think, you know, I think it's really all for the best in the end, because we're gonna get those books in that, you know, are, you know, things have changed so much in the last, you know, 10 years that it's kind of just giving us a nice chance to weed and get some new books in. but I would say, you know, it's very slow and steady at the moment.
Of course, of course. Awesome. Okay, so this is a good question for any of our presenters, and I'll put up my slides here in a second. And I I know this person. I recognize this name. Nancy George asks, "I'm not in. This is for anyone. I'm not in favor of libraries ditching Dewey for works of nonfiction. It seems impossible to me that any system could achieve the granularity of collocation." Oh man, oops, disappeared for me a second there. Beyond collocation the DDC offers behind a handful of well-worn subject areas. Do these models really browse that well? I think libraries should have an expectation of needing to maintain whatever classification they employ. The public needs good signage, good lighting, clearly marked areas to help them locate what they're looking for too. Jennifer, it looks like you answered that. Do you wanna just kind of expound upon that?
Well, for my library, I was doing a lot of helping people find things. I had kids come in and say, I need a book on animals. Okay, here, they're over here in the 500s, and they were 500, what? You know, even the adults were doing the same thing. Like, there's a what now? There's a number for this, what? And when I changed it over, then I had kids coming in and going, I need a book on animals. Okay, well, here's our animal section. Wow, you know, my circ stats jumped dramatically. The amount of time I had to help people finding things to the nosedive, which is fantastic for me because, like I said, I'm a solo librarian. I'm trying to do everything here, and I only have so much time in the day. So it really helped me, and it helped our patrons to do that, to do the getting the nonfiction grouped by subject, basically. And it just made it a lot easier for people to find things.
Do any of you any of the other panelists want to address that question? You know, do these models really browse that well? Is that something you want to address?
Yeah, I would also agree that I think it makes it just a little bit more accessible. You know, especially like on my end, you know, I only have kids, but I think that just the way that their minds work, I think it just makes it a little bit easier. And I think no matter what library you work in, it's always, you know, how can I get those books into people's hands? And I think this really does the job. One other thing I was going to say too is that, like, on a cataloging piece, I haven't removed the Dewey Decimal System from the catalog, but just from the actual book. So that way, you know, it's both pieces are there because you know, it's almost like a tradition, right? You can't take it away. But I think there is something to be said for making it just that, like, that one step closer to making it more accessible so more people can get the knowledge.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, I will say that I think it really depends. I think a lot of this depends on what kind of library you're in, right? And what your community is like and what you think that they want. So yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, everyone. Okay, another question. You all mentioned research. What do you read and you found the most helpful? And it looks like Jennifer, you already jumped on that as well. Do you want to talk about that real quick?
Well, unfortunately, I don't remember exactly what I read because it was 2 years ago. But I did a couple of, you know, just some Google searching and found articles about it. And then I also just went to BISAC, which is what we used as our general guideline for the nonfiction. And I just read through their lists. And I was like, okay, I see where we might be able to use, you know, we might need this category, we might need this category. And I just kind of went through it and kind of highlighted what I thought we would need and started pulling books that fit into those categories and using that as kind of my guideline.
Would you be able to point us to BISAC real quick? Someone in the chat, if that's possible, just so in case anybody doesn't know about it.
And if I can add too, you know, our research really, it was pre-COVID, obviously, but you know, we visited a lot of libraries and looked to see how it worked at their library, and we talked to, you know, the people on the front lines. You know, how are you able to find your books, and do you like this, and why don't you like it, and you know, what would you do different? That really was helpful. You know, we collected, you know, the brochures, and I did include in the chat a couple of the things that we use. And you know, you have to like sit down and brainstorm your list before you even do anything. And you know, we had a big whiteboard and we would just write everything on there before we narrowed everything down. And you really won't narrow down until you're actually in there looking at your books to see what do I actually have, because like Dan said, it's got to work for your library. You know, we still have Dewey, but we our fiction all have genre labels on the side, so it's similar to what you know, the other panelists were talking about with, you know, fantasy, historical fiction, adventure, you know. So you have to do what works at your library.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you all. This is a question, and I think I'm going to open this up to anybody who wants to answer. And you can answer in the chat or in the Q&A. Anne Marie asks, to anyone, does anyone have a list of categories, subcategories that you use for computer books? And if anybody has that, please share it with Anne Marie. We got about 3 minutes left, 2 minutes left. So this last one, I saw. 1 second. TLC asks, curious, do you three presenters have online catalogs for students to use, or the public, or your members? Yeah, I'm getting nods from everyone.
Yes, we do.
Okay, well, I don't see any other questions. If anybody, well, I guess if anybody else has any questions, you still have a couple minutes left. While we're waiting, I just want to say thank you to our presenters for all agreeing to come here and put together a presentation. I really appreciate it. Another thing I'll say is that I think one thing I should note is that there's a lot of different circumstances out there. There are a lot of different types of libraries represented, and a lot of different budget situations represented, community situations represented. So you're just going to see different approaches, and that's, you know, nothing's wrong. Nothing is correct and incorrect. It's just basically the way that you feel that you can best serve your community, especially with the resources that you have available to you. And I know that you're all trying to think about that in your own libraries, and especially during this really very odd time, right? So I do know that some libraries have indicated on listservs and other places the type of, you know, that they're going through projects to rearrange or reclassify their materials. I think this is kind of a good time to do so if you're in the building. Some of you aren't, I get that. But I just want to note that, yeah, there's probably a lot of you have questions. I would always point you in the general direction of our email lists. Rails has like 40 job and interest specific email lists. For a lot of you, it's going to be our youth services email list, which I think around 400 school librarians and children's librarians around Rails subscribe to. The same thing with ISLE, with the ISLE email lists. I know they all do a great job of handling those conversations, but just remember that you're not alone, even if you are alone and you're the only person in your public library. Rails is a community of libraries and librarians that are trying to help you and assist you in what you're trying to do. So, okay, well, I'm going to bring this to a close. I really appreciate everyone. Remember that this will be recorded. This is going to be up on the Rails YouTube page tomorrow. You'll all get an email about it from Zoom. It doesn't come from Dan Bostrom. It comes from our Zoom account. Really, thank you so much for all the great discussion and all the great questions and everything. It's been a lot of fun. I hope we can do more of these in the future. Jennifer, G, thank you so much for the idea. And we will have, I hope you all have a great Thanksgiving. Enjoy your weekend. Thank you so much.